Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the React Group PLC Interim Investor Presentation. Throughout this presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted any time via the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Simply click Q&A, type your question, and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question received during the meeting itself. However, the company will review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it's appropriate to do so. These will be available via your Investor Meet Company dashboard, and you'll be notified once they're ready for your review. I'd also like to remind you that this presentation is being recorded. Before we begin, we'd like to submit the following poll. I'd now like to hand you over to Mark Braun, Chairman, Sean Joke, CEO, and Andrea Pankhurst, CFO of React Group. Good morning.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks for joining us today on the Investor Meet platform. So I'm just going to start off by giving you a little walkthrough of what we're all about here at React and a little bit about the story. To those who have seen our presentations indeed on this platform before, then I apologise, but we will have some new investors on this platform that I think it's important we give the backstory. So I've just moved on to the first slide, please, Paul. So React carry out specialist cleaning and decontamination work that others aren't qualified to do, or they simply don't want to. We operate across several sectors and industries where hygiene and safety are critical components. Now you'll notice on this slide we've got a number of photographs, just gives you a flavour of some of these sectors that we operate within. So first of all, we've got the healthcare setting. So this work is recurring revenue, so it's contract maintenance work. Predominantly helps our clients remain compliant with their infection control. And it's a little bit like paint in the fourth bridge. You know, we start it, by the time we come to complete the contract, it's time to start it all over again. That gives you an idea of the work that we do in that setting. Work with many hospital trusts around the country, but we are particularly strong within the M25. Next, we've got the highways. It's a blended mix really of contract maintenance work, so recurring in nature, and also some reactive work. So the recurring revenue typically involves the deep clean and all year round ground maintenance work of some picnic sites and service stations around the country. Again, working for some large highways agencies and businesses typically involved in that space. And then we've also got the reactive piece. That typically is, road traffic collisions. We're on site within 4 hours, often less, to help clean up bodily fluids, debris, oil spillages, and so on. And we also do a lot of large fly tips within this space as well for some tier 1 customers. And next we've got the judiciary. So we're currently active as the chosen supplier or the exclusive supplier for many of the companies or our clients within that space. And ultimately, we're on standby to react within 4 hours across the whole mainland UK to decontaminate anything from a holding cell, transportation vehicles, magistrate courts, and so on. So we have a number of agreements within that space. And then we've got the housing associations. That can be, again, more reactive work by nature, but it's typically anything from a high-level gutter clean all the way through to a needle pick, a severe hoarding. There can be dirty protests in some of these houses. So it's, either after the people have been evicted or they've got to avoid property. And then last but not least, we've got the rail sector. So again, a blended mix. The majority of the work in that space is recurring by nature, so it's contracted maintenance work. So we do a lot of periodic heavy cleans for a number of manufacturers and train operating companies. And ultimately, that's a generally a nightly clean, very in-depth, almost a clinical level clean to bring the train back to how it once looked when it left the manufacturing plant. So, it is very specialist by nature, and that includes the external of the train also. And then we do more specialist reactive work, such as train station deep cleans, high-level clean. There's lots of specialities there. We've got to have road rail mutes to be able to access some of the canopies on the railway stations and so on. And then again, on the reactive, at the lower revenue side of things, we've got the fatality cleans and the graffiti cleans. So we are on site again within mainland UK to respond within 4 hours. At any site throughout the UK, we can be on site within 4 hours to help, return the train back to how it once was, and get it back into service. So clearly, at the end of the day, the work that we undertake has tangible value. The cost of not being able to get a train back onto the line or open a hospital ward is material, and that's the reason that we're valued by our customers, and we typically operate at high margins and standard janitorial cleaning. We operate in a very fragmented market, but the addressable market is significant, and we are right now beginning to see our clients consolidate their supply chains. And Reactive very much leading that process, talking to our customers, looking at the current supply chains and consolidating them down to just a handful or, an exclusive agreement. Next, you've got just to touch on the acquisition, or our maiden acquisition with Fidelis that we got across the line back in March. It strengthens our contract maintenance work. And they're particularly strong within the healthcare and the education setting. So, it gives us a great grounding really to really push the business on and give shareholder value. So ultimately, we're a specialist business. We've got some strong customer relationships, some good margins, and high potential for growth. I'm going to pass you over to Andrew now just to give you an overview of H1 financials.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Could you move the slide forward, please, Paul? Thank you. So, as you can see from the figures on the slide, we've got some really good movements year on year from last year, H1 to this year. Revenue, gross profit, and gross margin are all showing improvements. So, we have been through these figures in an update back in April, but I know there's probably some new people on here. So I'll just emphasize that these P&L figures that we're reporting are the existing React group only. We acquired Fidelis at the very end of March 2021, so there are no consolidated profit and loss figures in these results. Obviously there will be at the end of the full year. There'll be 6 months worth of Fidelis results. So the only figure of cash is the new consolidated group. So the balance sheet that we've reported in our interim accounts is includes it's the new group. So the £771,000 of net cash includes Fidelis's cash reserves at that date. And also that cash figure is after we paid 1.5 million cash as initial consideration for Fidelis. So that's already taken out of that figure. We've talked previously about the different sectors we worked in and how they've performed. I'll just give a little bit of update around those. So our contract maintenance sector, this is the type of work we do under a defined contract, and that contract could be a time defined contract or a price or a service defined contract. And typically it's the sort of contract we do for hospitals doing their deep clean, or for a rail company to do a program of deep cleaning on the trains, or at some of the highways customers we've got as well, where we have a contract for 3 years to provide a certain service. So year on year, that sector has grown slightly as a result of some new contracts and some contract renewals. And margins have improved from just over 30% to more like sort of 35%, so sort of mid-30s. The second sector, which is our contract reactive sector, this sector is where we have a framework agreement in place with our customer, and we get called out as and when they need us. So typically the police or the judiciary sector, where they need us to clean a cell or a prisoner transport van. That work, it's regular, it's recurring, but it is unpredictable as and when it happens. So that sector has seen a drop since last year. And we know that that is related to lockdown, basically, because the courts haven't sat during lockdown, and the police have had fewer prisoners to transport. So we fully expect that that sector to recover. I mean, this time last year, we had 1 month's worth of lockdown in our half-year figures. This year, we've got several months out of the 6 months that have been affected by lockdown. And then finally, our ad hoc sector. So these are really the one-off jobs that can come from our existing customers who may have a contract with us but need us to do a one-off clean of some sort, or brand new or one-off customers who contact us to help them out with a specialist bit of work. So this sector has seen a lot of growth year on year, and that has been primarily, or it's been significantly affected by COVID-19 decontaminations, but our other types of non-COVID work have been very busy as well. So, like Sean mentioned earlier, the sort of void property clearances or the fly tip clearances, those are sort of ad hoc jobs as well. So you can see that the average gross margin that we've reported in this half year is very high. It's just over 40%. It's gone up significantly since last half year. This is due to the mix of revenue we've had. The very high proportionate level of ad hoc work has swayed that margin. We actually think long term that level of margin isn't sustainable for us. With a more normal mix of business, we actually think that our true longer term margin will be between 30 and 35%. So I think I've covered everything I want to mention on the figures for the half year. Obviously, we're very pleased with these results, and we're looking forward now to working with Dallas and presenting their figures as part of our full year results at the end of September. Thank you, Sean. I'll hand back to you.
Thanks, Andrea. Cheers. So just moved on to the post-period announcements. Sorry, Paul, just go back a slide. Just moved on to the post-period announcements. I think I touched on it earlier on the first slide. One of our key objectives to our strategy moving forward is to help our supply chains and our customers consolidate their supply chains. And I think two examples of this are listed on that slide there. We've got the first contract just shy of £600,000. It was double the previous year's commitment from that customer, and it's a customer in the highways setting. So we brought in additional revenue there for that contract. And then secondly, we've got a 3-year core vendor to one of the world's leading facilities management companies. Very drawn out process to go through the tender process, but ultimately we're working with that client now to help unpick those embedded relationships that they had with their outgoing incumbent. And we're helping the category and cleaner manager work with their managers to shift that spend over from their previous incumbent to ourselves. We anticipate that there's still a bit of work to be done there, and it could take up to 12 months or so for it to really start bearing fruit. But I think it highlights a fantastic win for React, and just highlights what we're capable of when we really focus our sales attention and marketing on an opportunity. So moving on, Paul, to the next slide, please. The outlook. Well, H2 started really well. The Reactive or the React underlying contract maintenance has performed well. I think that's really an important foundation for the business. But as Andrea alluded to earlier, we slight softening in contract maintenance due to lockdown. and it's almost mirrors exactly the same time this last year. As Andrea said, the judiciary side, people weren't getting arrested, they weren't getting transported in vehicles, so we saw a dip in that work. But as of writing the statement a week ago, we've seen an uptick again to return to levels of last year. So the signs are very, very positive moving forward. The post-period wins, like I said, it underpins the medium to long term. And just on to Fidelis, really, our maiden acquisition, it was really imperative that we got this one right. We certainly feel as a board that we've nailed it. They've had a record April and May, some fantastic results. 90% of their revenue is recurring by nature, and typical tenure of their contracts is 3 to 7 years. So, it provides profitability and a good cash conversion. It just ultimately, gives us a positive outlook for the remainder of the year and beyond. So moving on to summary, please, Paul. So in summary, I said it on the first slide, we operate in a very fragmented market, but it is our strategy to help our customers consolidate those supply chains. We've had a very, very strong H1, and the outlook into H2 looks very promising too. And ultimately, our strategy is to continue the aggressive organic growth by utilizing the sales and marketing piece with that low-hanging fruit that we've got within the 25 or so key accounts. And we'll continue to look at some carefully selected M&A as we continue to grow. Thank you very much.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much indeed, Sean, Andrea, and Mark. Thank you for that presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, do please continue to submit your questions using the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. But just while the team take a few moments to review those investor questions submitted already, I'd like to remind you the recording of the presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can be accessed via your investor dashboard on the Investor Meet Company platform. I'd also like to remind you that your feedback is important to the company, and immediately after the presentation has ended, you'll be redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the company can better understand your views and expectations. Mark, perhaps if I could hand back to you. Obviously, we had a number of pre-submitted questions and some questions that have come through during the event itself. If I may, just where appropriate to do so, ask you to read out the question and direct it to the team or respond. Thank you.
Sure, yeah. This is the bit I think we enjoy the most, if I'm honest, because it's somewhat more interactive, and we'll give it a good go at trying to answer them as many as we can, and any we can't answer, obviously, we'll answer the full question set on our website later. So, starting with the first few that came in prior, they've not got a name associated with them, I'm afraid. But the first one is probably push this to you, Sean. As a cleaning company, could you explain what you consider to be React's defensive moat, if any, and therefore, effectively, what are the barriers to competition in competing with us in terms of where we're trying to focus?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So, like I said earlier, we operate in a fragmented market, but we operate at the specialist end, very much at the sharp end. Our SLAs are class leading, 4 hours and less. We can operate throughout mainland UK. And we've got some really good recurring revenue streams in terms of contract maintenance work that underpin the business. So I think the barriers to entry, certainly in our space and in our scale, are very difficult.
Yeah. Basically, to summarise that, we have quality contracts with some very significant sized organisations. Our reach and range is pretty difficult for even large companies to emulate. And when I talk about that, I mean range, to deliver all the types of services we do that are very niche orientated across the whole country is very difficult. That's why they tend to turn to us to be a subcontractor. And then at the end of the day, we've got high service levels, haven't we? Our troops at the front end are exceptional in terms of the jobs they do, and the feedback we get through customer sat, not just surveys but engagement, is very high. That's our moat, and it continues to be so. Okay, I'm going to take the second question a bit later, because it's talking about what do we see as our level of profitability or market cap in over the next few years. I'll cover that later, I think. There's a question here. The 3-year agreement with one of the world's leading facility management firms, was very encouraging news. How many more of your clients might this sole supplier ambition be applicable to? And are you in similar negotiations at present with any of them? Do you want to cover that as well, Sean?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we touched on it in previous presentations. The 150 or so customers we've got, probably around about 25 a year, what we deem to be key accounts. And I think we've covered this previously. We are proactively hunting and going after, these 25, 30 accounts to try and, capture as much spend in our space as possible. And in terms of what I said earlier, it's very much our strategy to help these clients consolidate the supply chains. And we're in a very unique position in the fact that we can provide a one-stop shop and we can provide it throughout mainland UK. And I don't believe there's anyone else that's out there that can do it. And as we've said previously, the likes of the ISS, your OCSs, people like that, they don't really want to involve themselves at the specialist end of the market. So I think we're in a good position as we continue that sales and marketing story and journey to, help our customers look at consolidating these very fragmented supply chains.
Yeah, I mean, I'll make a couple of comments, maybe at a strategic level. The first thing is if you take those 25, 30 companies and what they spend in our area of work, we don't need them to consolidate to just us. I mean, I think if they did, we would be, a gazillion times bigger than we are right now. And so our job is actually to become, become the number one choice. The fact that this one company has chosen to treat us as their one of one in a particular niche is great, and we're going to deliver on that. And what I think is knowing the market they operate in is very competitive. Others will look to see if it works, and if it does, they'll look to emulate that. Because it's a competitive space, and the time lost in trying to manage lots of suppliers in this space is quite a compelling opportunity for those other competitors to compete with this company. So, long story short, or to answer the question, it's our strategy to go and consolidate. We've got the relationships, we've got the skills. It's just about working that through, and I've no doubt at some point, one or two of these companies will look to do the same as this company we're referring to has done. But even if they don't, the opportunity for us is significant and will help us continue the organic growth we talked about. Sales productivity, Sean, I know all the questions are for you, but can we elaborate a bit more on the plans to improve sales productivity? What metrics should we look at to track your progress on employee productivity? I think the metrics bit is something that we will work on to be able to present. I don't think we are necessarily able to give that visibility at the moment, but I'm certain we will be able to because of the kind of process and systems you're putting in place. But do you want to just quickly elaborate a bit more about how some of the guys like Lee and Di and Abbas have become massively more productive in the way in which you've been working with them?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So, yeah, we've done a lot with our CRM system, which is HubSpot. And we've used fractional resources to pull in some real, talented people in terms of marketing, the CRM piece, just to make it as efficient and as effective as possible for the sales guys. So everything's linked back. So everything from our LinkedIn posts and the engagement that we have from that all the way through to the website and the click-through from the email campaigns and cadences that we built out feeds back into the CRM system. So we can ascertain response rates, click-through rates, call to action rates, everything else. So it's about making the sales team as effective as possible. So some of the stats that we've got on the back of that has helped us, really inform our marketing just to make it sharper as we continue that journey.
Absolutely, and I think we're gaining the productivity in terms of their more of their time is spent selling rather than cold calling.
Correct.
Because we're creating leads and we're creating cadences that are developing those relationships with customers. And the other thing that's quite amazing, I mean, I've seen some of this, is the actual engagement rates. Now, this may not be something that makes a lot of sense to all investors, but effectively we can track and see how people are engaging with each campaign, whether it's an email campaign or a social media campaign, a blog post, and I've seen some of the stats, and power to the elbow, it's phenomenal. I think we've had 27% engagement with one campaign, which is phenomenal. You normally expect 2-3%. And I heard yesterday that we had a 69% open rate with our latest campaign, where 69% of the people we're sending this campaign to are opening it, spending time on the campaign. That kind of engagement is not normally heard of in a B2B environment. So we know we're getting some of the productivity gains from that, and they do result in the salespeople being more productive. What competitor do we admire the most in our current market?
Yeah, I don't really admire any of our competitors, and that's not arrogance. It's just, I don't think there's anyone like us really. But who I do admire, who are slightly different, but there's similarities there in terms of our strategy, is Marlowe. I think what they've done in Marlowe with their buy and build and the organic growth is really impressive.
Yeah. And I think customer sat is pretty fundamentally important as well, measuring and checking in on that. I mean, there's a question a little bit later on about what's our customer retention rates, what's our win rates. We can talk about win rates, customer retention rates. I don't think we actually have as a metric, and you might think that's complacent, but it's not. Every time we lose a customer, this is true for Fidelis, we have a very intensive and passionate view about why did we lose. And I think we've only lost pretty much in React terms, one customer inside the last sort of 6 or 9 months. And that's not because of our work, it's because of their work. They were a small FM company that lost their contract. And as a result, we missed out. So we treat any lack of retention quite passionately and by exception, rather than looking at the rates. And I know that Fidelis operate in exactly the same way. I think it's important. Sorry, Matt, just on the back of that, I think it's important to add that although we lost that one customer, we have filled it with many more. And that's testament to the work that the guys have done in sales and marketing and that fractional use of the CRM system. And we don't always announce the small wins that we have because we won. I know we won with a major rail network. We won a fatality and graffiti cleaning contract in the last few weeks. But we just don't know how big that's going to be because we've got no track record with the customer to know how often their trains are covered in paint and how often they get animal strikes or fatalities. So we haven't announced it, but these are the sort of background things that are going on all the time. Question for you, Andrea, at last. How stable do you believe our gross margins can be going forward post-COVID? And I think you've already answered it, but it might be just worth repeating.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So, we monitor our margins very closely. We monitor them we actually monitor them at a job level and a customer level and a sector level. So we keep a very close eye on it. I think in the last year we have seen growth. We've seen growth in the margins over the last 2 years, and I think we're close to being at the levels we think we can get to. So obviously the mix is always, the future mix is always unknown. Our margins are higher for the more one-off jobs or the more specialist jobs we do. But we do think our average margin is going to be somewhere in the range of 30 to 35% in the longer term.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, trying to rapidly move on. Questions now coming in during the meeting. So Vivek S. has a few questions here. First one is, as a shareholder, I worry that long-term contracts to provide support services can result in onerous contracts like Carillion, Capita, and so on. How is this risk managed on initiation of contracts and through operational management? Now, I don't know whether you want to comment on this, Sean, but neither in Fidelis or in React do we have onerous terms, consequential losses, big liabilities that aren't covered by insurance. These are not onerous contracts at all, are they?
No, not at all. No, it's very different to my background in the construction and M&E space. There's no liquidated damages or anything like that there. And if there's anything, we go for part of my background is quite commercial, so I'll always do a commercial review of any contract that we've got line of sight on anywhere. And if there's anything untoward in there, then I'll always push back and comment. And we've not had any issues so far with it.
it's not necessary. It's not a requirement. And you know, if there were, we would walk away from it. It's just we don't need to have contracts that are going to create that level of risk for the company. So hopefully that answers the question for you, Vivek. I mean, obviously on the initiation, we're very strong in terms of engagement with the customer and initiating each contract in a specific way. We do an awful lot of training, as do Fidelis. So I think that we iron out any other risks associated with that contract engagement, very early on with a very predictable and scalable process. Second question from Vivek is competitive environment. Could we add some color around the industry fragmentation? To what extent do you partner with versus compete with large facility stroke hygiene companies like ISS and Rentokil? We've answered these questions before, so just want to give a quick summary, Sean.
Yeah, so in terms of your large competitors like ISS or OCS or people like them, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, they don't operate at the specialist end of the market. So they partner with ourselves they basically subcontract to the likes of to carry out that work for them. So we'll do it in almost like a JV approach to their client.
Yeah, indeed. So I think I've seen it in the tech world as well. At the end of the day, you compete and you partner with the same companies in order to get the end result that the customer wants and needs. Now, by acquiring Fidelis, you could argue there's a little bit of competition there, but we're very much talking at a sort of a lower level. So in the likes of and I don't want to be specific about the companies, but if you talk about the community that ISS and Rentokil and OCS and Sodexo and all that they're in, they absolutely need companies like React in order to fulfill their customer obligations, which are over a much broader set of services. And therefore, I think that's what works well for them, is the fact that we can deliver on time to the level of quality that they need, and we can do it rapidly in a time frame that we think is pretty much unbeatable at the moment, and very competitive. Okay, moving on. Quick final question from Vivek for the minute is about statues and graffiti cleaning. A lot of protests in 2020. I don't remember us actually turning up to clean any statues, did we?
We did quite a bit of graffiti, but we do quite a bit of graffiti anyway. So I don't have any segmental analysis in terms of what was in response to that. I know of a few isolated cases that was definitely as a result of that work, but nothing in particular really.
So it didn't create a spike of any kind, really?
No, not at all. No.
Okay. I'm going to answer one of these other questions a bit later. It's about what's society shaping in the future. That's from Dave. It's from Bruce. Dave, I'm going to answer your question in a minute. So I'm just going through these here. Bruce A, just to continue what we've been saying, again, it might be repeating yourself, Sean, but can you give us an overview of the competitive landscape? Who are your major competitors and what are your competitive strengths? I think we've already talked about our competitive strengths, but that landscape bit again, about the small, niche-orientated, short geography versus the big companies. We know Rentokil are in pest control, but they're not really into a lot of the other niche bits that we do.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So, I've said it again. I've said it before, sorry. It's a fragmented market. So there's a lot of people out there. There's some larger companies, as Mark said, your Rentokils, your PHSs, who dabble in the specialist division, but actually their specialist division isn't really that big. So we don't come up against them that often. And the reason for that is they can't, as Mark said, we're a one-stop shop. They aren't. So I think there is an element where they do have to subcontract that work out. Below us, there's a lot of companies that may turn over perhaps up to £1 million or less, bigger than mom and pop shops, but they'll specialize in oil spillage cleanups, or they'll just specialize in fly tips. And you have to remember that we built out a very robust partnership agreement here at React. So we actually partner with some of those specialists in that space to help us scale up when we're really, really busy. And they are audited exactly the same way as our own employed operatives. So it works really well. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Look, there's no doubt that we will end up with some form of competition. We have competition at that sort of localized level. There's no doubt it will come, but we can only focus on the fundamentals of our business and keep doing what we're doing and doing it well. And as that competition becomes more obvious, then they'll give us other benchmarks against which to compete. I'm just trying to see if there are any other questions here that can be answered operationally before we get to some of the sort of other things. Bear with me a second. Oh, one for you, Andrea, from Dave R. As revenues grow, what will be the increase in the level of HQ and platform costs? Now, we're a very humble company, and if anybody wants to look at our premises on Google Earth, they might be a little bit surprised. That's both for us and for Fidelis. And, I'd like to think we have no ivory tower approach. We very much operate our head office at an atomic level. And we believe that the operational gearing we have is phenomenal, and we want to keep it that way. But any comments to that question? What will happen to our HQ and platform costs?
Okay, so yes, there's not many of us really at the head office, but I feel we've invested a little bit this year in improving our systems. And when I say invested, it's not actually costing us any more than our old systems used to. It's more that we've invested time and effort in changing our processes a little bit and improving them and making things a bit slicker. So, I don't see, I feel there's quite a lot of growth we can still do without adding extra headcount or head office cost. I haven't got any particular figures or scale to sort of quote, but, we have stated this in the past that we have worked on becoming more efficient, and I think we are, getting there. And so I don't think scaling up will, I think any scaling up and any additional profits will mostly fall to the bottom line.
Yeah, brilliant. That was a question from Bruce A, by the way. Right, sorry, so I'm just trying to find the final operational ones before we go to some of these more strategic financial type questions. One other question from Vivek S. This is for you, Andrea, and I don't know whether you can answer it now or later, but was the cash flow from operations to profit reconciliation, excluding, which in brackets is adjusted for, working capital movements, so excluding working capital movements arising from the acquisition of Fidelis? So what is the cash flow from operations to profit reconciliation?
Okay, so the reconciliation figures are very much based on operations. And as I said earlier, the P&L that we've reported is the old React group only. So those cash flows in that reconciliation are relating to React group only as well, because I wanted that reconciliation to match with the profit and loss account. So in the actual consolidated statement of cash flows, you'll see a single line that mentions acquisition of subsidiary, and there's a cash outflow of £1.345 million. So that is our spend that we've made during the period, less some cash reserves that were already in the company. So hopefully that answers the question.
I hope so. I don't want to write that down too much. It's there in the numbers, though. Yeah, it is there in the numbers.
Yeah, it is.
We're very transparent. So hopefully that answers your question, Vivek. Right, let's go try and clear off some more. So we answered the question about this is from the host, so it was a pre-meeting question. We answered the question about retention, customer retention. It just asked about win rates. Now, what are our win rates when competing for contracts? Now, this is different depending on what type of thing we're looking at, isn't it, Sean? If we look at Fidelis, we know their win rate is about 1 in 3, is that right, of bids that they're working on?
Yeah, slightly more.
Slightly better than that, is it?
Yeah, so for Fidelis' route to market traditionally has been heavily geared towards traditional tender. But as Mark said there, they have a really good success rate. Typically it's usually 1 in 5 at a push, 1 in 6 in this space.
But theirs is better, yeah?
Yeah, lots better,
Yeah, the 1 in 6 is typical of the market, where Fidelis were running up about 1.3, 1 to 3, yeah.
1 to 3, yeah. Whereas React, typically due to the nature of our work and I guess the strategy that we've always had in play, we tend to engage, or we spend a lot more time engaging direct with the customers. And that pulls me back to, the 25 key accounts that we've got. They already engage with us, they're aware of us, they're perhaps just not aware of the full range of one-stop services we can provide. So we've worked really hard, the sales team and myself, being involved at the sharp end, getting in front of these customers, and I have since day one. And that very much continues as I keep, obviously, control over the overarching operations.
So when we're bidding for work, as opposed to tendering for work, our win rate is probably 2 in every 3?
Yeah, easily.
Could even be higher, yeah. But
yeah.
It's our bid. It's when we're bidding for work. Tendering is a little bit more hit and miss, or has been, and I think a lot of that has been down to, as we've gone through the last year or so, we have chosen to try our hand at various tenders, and we're slowly but surely understanding where we fit. And obviously the successes we've had with the 2 contracts you mentioned in the post period is an example of that. But we're not a big tendering organization, are we, in terms of reactive business? Don't need to. It's more bidding.
No, that's true. But you also got to just to point out to the investors that are on the platform today, Mark, that although those 2 are contracts, and we did have to go through a formal bidding process, they were actually started by relationship building.
Yeah,
they are,
exactly.
Yeah, and that's very much key to what the strategy that we have.
Absolutely. Right, let me get into the final series of questions, and I am probably going to do more of the talking here. But Andrew and Sean, you fill any gaps. So, one from Bruce: taking a 3 to 5 year view, what size, shape might React become, and what are the major actions required by the company to get there? So, we have talked about this before, and I hope I'm being consistent with what we've said before, because our plan and strategy has been, pretty much unchanged. Those 25 or so big reactive companies that we scratched the surface of in terms of the potential revenue in probably 19 to 20 of them. What we're trying to do is what we've done with the other 5, which is to grow out our relationship with those companies, and we believe there is a massive organic growth opportunity there that we aim to punch a big hole in over the next 3 to 5 years. It just takes time. It's about relationship building and so on and so forth. But we see material organic growth available there. So that's a key part of the strategy. With Fidelis, they've got a great win rate, they've got a great reputation. It's much more about the contract maintenance business and therefore long-term visibility. And we see their organic growth continuing in the way it has done before. So organic growth is obviously going to be important. There may be, little bumps in the road when you're talking about such a long period, but we're confident that the potential is there, and we've got the right sort of set to be going for it. So you can imagine if our run rate at the moment, in terms of our forecast, is for a 10 going on 11 million pound turnover business generating 1.2 million ish of EBITDA. With the operational gearing we've got, if we were to double the revenue over the next 3 years, you could see a fair chunk of that gross margin that would be generated dropping to the bottom line. So that's one component, is the organic growth. The second component is I think that this business over the last 2 and a bit years has gone through 2 of the 3 stages. The first stage is complete rebuild and turnaround. And those of you who've been following the story will know what that's been like. The team have now built a much more robust platform on which they're showing they can sustain this performance and the revenue growth. This third phase is about continuing to build on the organic side, but now looking at buy and build. There's no doubt there's a key opportunity for us to buy and build in a very accretive way. We've always said any acquisition would be accretive and earnings enhancing, and relevant to us in terms of our strategy. And Fidelis was exactly that. I hope that that's given people confidence that we've got the ability and the skill to do it. I would say to you that the Fidelis deal came as a result of us just doing some background work in the background of being busy with building the company, and therefore you could argue that Fidelis was somewhat serendipitous. It came to us as one of multiple opportunities that we turned down, and we bought very well. They're a great team. Love the owner that's still on board and working with us, Lloyd Asimov and his team. And there's lots more out there like that. But that's where I'm dedicating perhaps more of my time now, because the operational side of the business is working well, and I do see M&A as being a key feature. And we have some professional help now looking to help us build our pipeline of opportunities. And so I am hopeful that there'll be more stories around this. But remember, accretive. We bought Fidelis 4.75 times earnings. It's cash generative, and it's been completely earnings enhancing. So I think that the opportunities that are in front of us, we believe, mean that in the next 3 to 5 years, this company could be going on a similar pathway. Maybe not quite as big, maybe not quite as valuable as the company Sean mentioned earlier about like Marlowe, but we do think there's a big opportunity here. And I should also say that at some point we will get to a size where somebody's going to want to buy the company, and that does provide an opportunity for investors that want to realize some of that value. I've no doubt that as we head, we're now market cap of 13, 14 million. There's been a bit of a retail sell-off and profit taking since the announcement, but all the institutions are still very, very supportive of the story here. We could easily see, and it's not fantasy, we could easily see organic growth on the current business, meaning we double our revenues and get bigger profits over the next 3 years. But M&A could mean we could be 3, 4, 5 times bigger than that, with all the operational gearing set in. So a bit of a bit of verbal there, but hopefully that explains to you that we're on a mission to get ourselves to be a much bigger company and create a tremendous amount of value for everybody, including ourselves, in that process. So hopefully, Bruce A, that answers that question. Let me go through the others. Dave R, you've asked a question about Fidelis hitting their full deferred consideration, plus the implementation of announced contracts in. Basically, you're asking me to forecast what we're going to do in revenue in 2022, and I think your thinking is about right, but I'm not going to, and nor is anybody else. We're not going to talk about forecasting next year at the moment. So forgive us for not answering that at the minute. We're absolutely, and if you look at our track record, we're absolutely focused on being conservative and transparent at the same time. We're not trying to talk up anything. We're just saying what it is and where we are. And hopefully you've seen the tone of our announcement that we've been honest and said, look, a couple of months, we're soft for our reactive contract business. And exactly the same thing happened last year, and you've seen the results since. So we're very open, very transparent, but we're not going to go trying to set the share price alight with statements that we right now cannot guarantee. And we want to be certain to set our expectations at the level where we can exceed. So hopefully you understand that, Dave. Greg W says, are you still confident meeting the full year forecast published by Allenby Capital? The answer to that question has to be, if we thought any otherwise, we would be changing it. And that's not a smug remark, it's just a fact. We're not allowed to say anything more than that's the forecast, and it will change if we believe it should. Paul C, is there a prospect of a dividend? At the moment, Paul, what the picture we're painting is one of a company that wants to grow capital rather than provide income. And I often think, and there's a bit of a conflict when an organisation is saying that it's about capital growth, then giving some of that money back to shareholders that they want to invest in accretive acquisitions or in incremental growth. So at the moment, no plans to provide a dividend, and we've not got institutional holders that need a dividend, and there are people in the wings waiting as we grow in size to come in. So I don't see the imperative need to generate a dividend, but that's not to say never, But again, hopefully you understand the strategy there. We think we should be preserving cash to focus on growing the asset value. Where are we? I think I've answered the question that was here before about level of profitability and market cap we're aiming for. I think, and in what time frame. I think I've answered that one. And then, what do you see as the major barriers to growth, and what do you need to do to reduce them? Again, I'll just answer that in terms of we, like any company, need a bit of luck. I'd never say that it's all down to the brilliance of the team we've got. We always need a bit of luck, but I think it's about continuing to be humble, not wanting to be egocentric and an ivory tower, and just focus on customer success. And if we focus on the customer success, we'll get the results come through. That sounds a little bit cliched, but the barriers in our way are just time and resources. Now, we could go out and invest an awful lot more in an awful lot more salespeople, but I think we've got it about right. I think that if we can carry on growing at these sorts of levels, as I say, there will always be bumps in the road over a 5-year period, but the market is there. Our underlying growth is there. The security in that underlying growth is backed up by, some fairly long-term contracts. It's a recurring revenue play. I mean, if this was, maybe it's a bit facetious to say, but if this was a software company, it would be probably differently rated. It's not. But, if you look at the recurring nature of our revenue, the income, the gearing that's now available, because our operational head office costs are so small, and all the net fee income, all the gross profit tends to trickle down to the bottom line. I think we're in a good place. What could we do more? I think we've got the levers within our grasp at the moment. That might change as the market changes, but right now, unless either of you disagree, I think we're in a good place.
Agree.
You got anything to add? Any barriers that you want us to try and reduce? Maybe just the customers. Maybe just the customers need to understand what we do and give us more work. But that's what we're trying to do with the sales team. Yeah.
No, there's nothing to add really, Mark. I think you hit the nail on the head.
Brilliant. Well, look, I think, Paul, I think we're done. We've answered all the questions, those that we can answer. Is there? I think that's about it.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much indeed, Mark, Sean and Andrea. As usual, you've answered every single question, so I'm sure it's greatly appreciated by the attendees, so thank you very much indeed. Sean, perhaps before we redirect investors to give you guys some feedback, you may just have a final few words, please.
Yeah, just thanks for taking the time out today to watch the presentation. The questions have been quite extensive and covered a broad brush of items, so useful to be able to answer them. And thanks very much for your time.
It's fantastic. Mark, Sean, Andrea, thank you again for updating investors today. Could I please ask investors not to close this session and should be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the management team can better understand your views and expectations. It's only take a few moments to complete and is greatly appreciated by the team. On behalf of the management team from React Group, thank you very much for attending today's presentation.